Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Alumni Festival 2020 session on GATE Scholars. How much impact can individual social entrepreneurs have on development? My name is Jaideep Prabhu. I'm a professor of marketing and innovation at the Judge Business School, and it's my great pleasure to chair this session with three excellent speakers, all GATE scholars: Carol Ibe, Shadrack Frimpong, and Riaz Moola. We'll be hearing from each of these scholars in a moment. They speak for about 5 minutes to tell us what they've been doing to make an impact on development. Now, before we proceed, I just want to tell you a little bit about the GATE scholars. You may be aware this is the 20th anniversary of GATE's Cambridge. This scholarship program for international postgraduates was set up in 2000 after a $210 million grant to the university from Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Scholars are selected based on their academic excellence and their strong commitment to improving the lives of others. I'm now going to ask our first speaker, Shadrack Frimpong, to speak. So Shadrack, it's over to you.
Thank you for the opportunity. It's an honor to be here. My name is Shadrack Frimpong, everybody. I Gates Cambridge 2020, basically just started this October. So I'm really, just really excited to get started. I did my undergraduate degree in biology at the University of Pennsylvania here in the US. And then I also got a master's degree in nonprofit leadership, also from Penn as well. And then came to Yale for a master's degree in public health. And at Cambridge, I'll be pursuing a PhD in public health and primary care, looking at a model that I'll be sharing with you very shortly, which is, which revolves around the work that we do in Ghana. So again, I'm from Ghana, still an international student. If there are any international students on this call, shout out to everybody. From Ghana, international student. And in 2015, when I graduated from the University of Pennsylvania, I had the opportunity to, take the President's Engagement Prize, which I want, to take that seed funding back to Ghana to start a nonprofit that we call Cocoa 360. And what Cocoa 360 we do basically is, we're a nonprofit organization that leverages the power of community engagement and also community farm revenues from cocoa farms to improve health outcomes and then educational services in rural communities in Ghana. We started operations in 2017, and it's gratifying to know that in little close to about 3 years since we've been in operation, we've been able to establish an all-girls tuition-free school, a medical facility, and then currently having about 60 acres of land, most of which are uncultivated, but we have about 20 acres that has matured cocoa. And these entities are what help us to run what I call the Farm for Impact model. And the Farm for Impact model was a model that we came up with. And as the name implies, basically how it runs is that in exchange for tuition-free education and subsidized medical care, community members work on the community-run cocoa farm. And then at the end of the harvest cycle, we sit down with the community, vote, and then decide what percentage of the farm's profits and revenues we decide to, leverage towards improving outcomes at both the school and the health facility. And so in some years, we leverage the revenue to, improve maternal care. In some years, we've leveraged the revenue to ensure that, at least at the school, currently, all expenses that are not salary related, teacher salary related. By that, our students' uniform, books, transportation expenses. We leverage all those. We've leveraged revenue to basically offset all those expenses. And what started just in one community has, moved to currently serve close to 35,000 farmers in 8 communities. And we're hoping to continue to expand that model across any of the 1,300 cocoa growing communities in Ghana. Ghana alone, you have 1,300. We've not even talked about Ivory Coast, which is which is the leading exporter of cocoa in the world, and Indonesia and many other cocoa growing countries across the globe. The power of our model is something that initially we didn't think much about again, but as time has progressed and time has moved on, we've come to realize the power of the model, the Farm for Impact model, in helping us to address issues that we currently see in the world. Issues like, making sure that disadvantaged populations, like in many rural communities in Africa, like young girls typically, can have access to education without finances being a barrier. So, but this time we're not leaning on donor funding. We are leaning on the community's own efforts by working on the farm. Same thing at the health facility, looking at user fees, healthcare user fees. In the US and elsewhere, this is called copay. And while these amounts are very small, typically between $2 to $5, you'll be shocked in many rural communities, a lot of people cannot afford, and it becomes a barrier to healthcare. There's a lot of studies that have been done showing how significantly user fees can block healthcare services utilization and significantly impact health outcomes negatively. So this is what, for me, is getting me to Cambridge this October to begin my PhD, to really look into understand. Over the past 3 years we've been working, we've been leveraging the farm revenues to offset non-salaried expenses at our school. What has been the impact and what is driving that kind of success we've been seeing? And now pilot the model similarly at our healthcare facility. And again, to specifically target healthcare expenses such as user fees, as I described earlier. The power of our model and the power of the health research outcomes that we can see is that when we go into a new community, we don't have to reinvent the wheel many times. We can just easily partner with many governments and then be able to scale rapidly. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Shadrach. Very inspiring and very informative as well. Now I'd like to ask Riaz to share his work with us. Over to you, Riaz.
Hi, thanks so much for that introduction, and great to be here too. So yeah, my name is Riaz Moola. I'm from South Africa. I'm in South Africa at the moment, but I live between the UK and South Africa. I did my undergrad in artificial intelligence at the University of Edinburgh, exchange semester at the University of Pennsylvania, actually also, and did 2 masters at Cambridge, one on a Gates Cambridge Scholarship in advanced computer science, specializing in kind of machine learning, and a second master's in the business school in technology policy, not on a Gates Cambridge Scholarship, I will say, but somebody else kindly funded me. And yeah, I started a company called Hyperion Dev back in 2012, and we introduced another brand called Cogrammer 2 years ago, but we're one company with these 2 brands. What we do is we are the largest provider of tech education in the Southern African region, so South Africa, Zimbabwe, Botswana. So we train people to become software developers through online and on-site courses, but primarily online. And these courses are a form of workforce acceleration, kind of taking people to be employable software, web developers, and data scientists in 3 to 6 months. So very intensive, hands-on programs that are increasingly being seen as alternatives to university degrees in the markets we operate in. So that was not our intention when we started the business, but it is how we have started to be seen in the market, which is quite exciting from an impact perspective, but also comes with its own set of challenges. The other business or brand that we have, which is Cogrammer, is a little bit more complicated. It's similar to the business Andela, if anybody's heard about them, but we basically train people to become code reviewers. and integrate them to do code review for US and European companies in a way that's much more affordable for these companies, but still allows us to pay really good salaries locally, but also use some technology to speed up how these code reviews work. So it's a form of business process outsourcing, but in a vertical of tech. And rather than simply just outsourcing software development, we're kind of looking at a new area, which is code review, which is, okay, not actually that new, but it's kind of grading of technical work, assessing developers in the hiring process, and checking the quality of code committed into code bases of tech teams. And when you look at the market that way, it's a really big market. It's really how humans understand the quality of technical code. So we feel there's a huge opportunity there on the programmer side to create a lot of jobs in Africa that don't currently exist, that are currently being done perhaps suboptimally by computers abroad, or being done really more expensive, in a more expensive way abroad. So those are the two sides. In terms of social impact, we've evolved our model a lot over the years to try to find one that works. And it's a combination of things that come together. On the Hyperion side, we've unexpectedly grown, to become one of the largest players in the space, one of the main producers of developers in the region, graduating more students than all of the computer science university departments combined. But then again, people who study computer science degrees are learning a different set of skills, but primarily what companies are, dying to have is more software developers, even during COVID. And so, the opportunity to accelerate somebody to have those skills and get them employed without a quote unquote formal 3 or 4 year long university degree is quite exciting, because employers in this space, care much more about how you perform in a technical interview and very little about anything else, really. And so making that education accessible to people from different demographics, but also accessible to people who live far away from campuses, who, perhaps online or remote learning is the way for them. And even now during COVID, when accessible for everybody means online, as you can see in this conference, has been quite exciting. We were funded by Facebook and Google in 2016. So Facebook selected us as the most socially impactful tech startup in the region. But yeah, again, on the programmer side is where we think we can create a lot of jobs, create this new career path of a full-time code reviewer, kind of like a copywriter for code, and, really add value both locally in Southern Africa, but also internationally in the US. So we've worked with some big brands, companies like Lambda School, one of the largest tech education providers in the US, 2U, a public US edtech company that delivers online degrees for companies like, universities like Cambridge, actually. And so, yeah, very excited to be here and to participate. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Riaz. Really interesting. And of course, I've known Riaz since he did his MPhil at the Business School in Technology Policy. So we go back a long way. So good to hear what you've been doing and where you've progressed since then. I'd like to invite our third speaker now, Carol Ibe. So over to you, Carol.
Thank you so much. So my name is Carol Ibe, and I completed my PhD at the University of Cambridge, actually earlier this year, in plant science, where I studied fungal interactions with rice roots. And I'm currently doing a postdoctoral research at the John Innes Center, which is based in Norwich, where I'm working with wheat and with pathogens, which is very exciting. So I did my undergraduate degree in Nigeria. I was born in the US, but I grew up in Nigeria. And I went to school in Nigeria. Went back to the US many years ago to do a master's degree at Georgetown, and then also subsequently a second master's degree at the University of Oxford, worked a little bit in research, and then started a PhD in Cambridge, which I've now completed. So I would say that what drove me actually into founding the JR Biotech Foundation, which is a nonprofit organization that I'll talk to you in the next few slides, is my experience doing an undergraduate degree in Nigeria, where I was a science student studying microbiology. But when I went to the US, I realized that my undergraduate degree did not prepare me for the next steps in my academic pursuit. It was very frustrating for me because the curriculum was different and everything was different. So I pretty much had to start again, but it was at a master's degree level, which was more challenging. However, with a lot of perseverance, I made it through. And that was when I decided that I was going to do something to make a difference across the region, Africa, Nigeria, and other countries, by establishing a charitable organization that will educate, inspire, and empower Africa's next generation of scientists who can tackle problems in Africa. And as you all may know, Africa is a continent that is rich with various resources, human resources, material resources, really blessed. However, it is considered the poorest continent in the world, which is really not a good thing. Recently, the United Nations estimated that there are more than 300 million people who are food insecure in Africa, more than 240 million people who are severely undernourished on the continent. And again, we know that Africa is the poorest, with 42% of the population of sub-Saharan Africa living on $1.90 or less per day. And my concern, and I think our concern should be, that Africa's population is growing very rapidly, currently at 1.2 billion people, but estimated to double to 2.4 billion people by 2050. And what this means is that we have more mouths to feed. There will be a lot of people who would need more nutritious food, adequate food, in order to tackle food insecurity in Africa. Agriculture, as you may know, is a major driver to Africa's economic development. Actually, the majority of the largest employer of labor currently in Africa is agriculture. And that is because there's many people who live in the rural areas rely on agriculture, subsistence farming, to be able to produce food to sell, not only to eat, but also to sell, to have money to train their children in school. And currently, agricultural productivity has decreased or reduced across the region due to several problems like climate change effects, deteriorating soil conditions, lack of resources, funding, poor education, even on the part of the farmers. And this is where JR Biotech comes in. JR Biotech Foundation comes in, which is a nonprofit organization that I started just a year before my PhD. And I was able to sort of combine my PhD while also organizing events through the foundation and expanding our horizon by meeting new people, students from Cambridge and other universities who volunteered and still volunteer to help us to reach thousands of African researchers. So at JR Biotech, what we do is that we design and develop molecular laboratory-based programs to support African researchers, African agricultural researchers, who are mainly plant breeders in other areas like virologists looking at plant diseases, who lack the resources, the knowledge, the expertise, the skills that they need to improve their research and to advance innovation that can tackle food insecurity across the region. As you may know, a few years ago, during the World Economic Forum on Africa, a recent publication came up, which was, there are not enough scientists in Africa. The question was, how can we turn this around? In that publication, it was estimated that compared to America and the United Kingdom that have an average of 4,000 researchers per 1 million people, Africa barely has 200 researchers per 1 million people, which then led them to conclude that Africa needs another 1 million new PhDs to be able to meet the world's average. So then I start to ask myself, how do we get there? And even though JR Biotech Foundation is not a university, like Riaz said, we do equip African researchers with the immediate skills they need to be able to contribute, improve their research, and improve food security. And so at JR Biotech Foundation, like I said, we are a capacity building sort of organization. And what we're really doing is to find ways to improve research capacity across Africa, especially in the area of agriculture and applied biosciences. How do we do this? We have three major programs, one that we call the Reach and Teach Science in Africa. And as the name goes, it means to reach as many as possible, teach as many as possible, and to provide African researchers across the region with the right academic resources that they need to teach others, to train others, and to make a difference. And we have also the Bio Innovation for Africa Pitch Challenge, which we decided halfway along the line to start up. The reason being that a lot of researchers, including here in the United Kingdom, don't think that they are innovators. They don't think that they can actually create products and services that can make a difference in the lives of others. And so we started this as a challenge to challenge African researchers to think outside the box, think beyond the bench side, and start to think of how they can actually create products that will make a difference through their research or through other means as well. And so we've run this for 3 years in a row, and it's amazing the kind of products, nonprofit organizations and companies that have come out from there, although they still lack the resources they need to get to where they want to be. And finally, recently, Noor, a PhD student, originally from Somali, who fled Somalia at the age of 8 with his parents to the United Kingdom due to war, went to Cambridge University, did his PhD there, and is currently a postdoctoral researcher. I met him through the J.R. Baltic connection at Cambridge, and he volunteers with the foundation. 2 of us have successfully mentored 2 undergrad master's degree students from Nigeria and Somalia who will be who have just started their master's degrees at Cambridge University, and we're very proud of that. And these students are extremely intelligent, but what they lack is the resources and also the guidance that can help them to achieve their career goals. So Carol, Noor and I decided to set up an African Bioscience Mentoring Academy, targeting high achieving and highly motivated African students that we started to mentor this month. And so this is to be able to contribute to addressing several challenges that we have across Africa. And to date, I will tell you that we've now reached more than 3,000 early career African researchers in more than 50 nations, not just in Africa, but interestingly, from South Asia. And the COVID pandemic actually caused us to quickly develop a virtual learning platform where we offer lectures, core high quality world-class lectures in the area of plant molecular biology, biotechnology, and biosciences, reaching thousands of students across Africa and also researchers. So as you see, we've grown so rapidly, and we continue to build our online platform because then we have more rich people benefiting from the materials. We send them the lecture materials and the reading materials, which they now use to teach other students as well. And so we're really proud of what we've achieved, and thank all our supporters for supporting us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Carol. You know, all of you are so inspiring. There's so much insight there. I was struck by some parallels between your stories. I have several questions for you. I also see that our audience has been active, and we have a few questions in Q&A, which I'll get to in a second. But to our audience, please do keep your questions coming. We're going to get to your questions in a minute. So use the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. So Shadrach, Riaz, and Carol, you know, I was struck by some parallels between what you're doing. I mean, or also your biographies. You know, you've grown up in Africa, then gone to the States in some cases, come here, and then you've decided to do something back in Africa. And you know, my first question to you, you can give me a very quick answer, each of you, is why go back to Africa? You could have, you know, stayed here in the US, or you could have stayed in the US or stayed in the UK where you studied. There are so many opportunities for you here. What took you back to Africa? So maybe I'll start with you, Carol, since you're there.
Sure, yes. Well, I'm still here in the United Kingdom. I haven't moved back to Africa. However, we're making a difference in Africa. And I like that concept. I like the fact that, you know, when I was finishing my PhD and I got to the final finish line, and everybody was asking me, so when are you going back to Nigeria? And I'm like, I did not come from Nigeria directly. I was living in the US and came here. And even though it's a legitimate question, but then people have this expectation that because you're African, you must go back to Africa. And there's nothing wrong with that. However, my concern is being trained in Cambridge in core science, biological science, and going back to a place where I may struggle to have the right infrastructure and the innovative approaches and methodologies that I need to build the level of research that I would be interested in that can make a difference across the continent. However, I still believe that people can make a difference from wherever they are. And I think COVID has now taught us that and shown us that we can actually work together from wherever we are and make an impact. For me, it's not necessarily just moving back physically, however, making an impact by empowering those who are there. So Africa has a lot of extremely intelligent scientists and students who can fix Africa right now as we speak. If they have the right resources, if they have the right connections, and if they have the right infrastructure to make the type of difference they want to make. What they don't need is somebody from Cambridge coming to tell them what to do. However, we can provide advice and resources like funding, which is usually a major problem that they have and challenge as well, and mentoring, to mentor the next generation with the knowledge that we have, and also be open to learning what they have there. Because when we started to go back to Africa to run our workshops, that's where we actually now understood the real problems on ground. So while in Cambridge or America, you have a different sort of mindset or picture of what you think Africa is, and we can develop cool programs. However, when you go back into the continent, you then realize that I've made all these programs. However, there's no internet connection, or there is something that is missing. There is no ice, there's no liquid nitrogen that I can use to extract, do my core biological experiments. And so I believe that I can make a difference from wherever I am, and I'm doing my little that I can while empowering those who are on the continent.
Great, wonderful. So you feel you can make the biggest impact from here, engaging with Africa. Riaz, how about you?
Hey, yeah, I think you get perspective. If you come from South Africa, at least, I don't really know about the rest of Africa. Africa is very big and diverse and different. But when you come from South Africa, you have these romantic notions of what it's like abroad, especially the UK. Everybody's obsessed with the UK, especially here in Cape Town. But then when you go to the UK and you live there, you see a lot of the cons. And you see how certain systems and processes have resulted in good things, but also bad things. And you see the opportunity, the gap in opportunity in South Africa or in your home country becomes a lot clearer. I think the perspective is really important. And there are certain models and things that have been done in the UK that you could see those things applied in an African context. For us, for example, we're basically a boot camp like Makers Academy in London, which is one of the bigger coding boot camps in the UK. But people in the UK don't see Makers as an alternative to university, but people in South Africa see us as an alternative to university. So it's not copying models, but it's seeing the types of things that have been done and the different approach that's been taken and saying, how can I make that make sense in an African context or South African context? And having that perspective makes you see an opportunity that's so huge, you just can't avoid it, right? It's better than the opportunities of working for Google or joining whatever investment bank in London, If you really want to make an impact and do something and you see an opportunity as big as that, I mean, it's a no-brainer, you gotta go for it.
That's really interesting, and that you could, in a way, be a substitute or even better than universities. That really should make even Cambridge sit up and notice. Thanks for that, Riaz. Shadrach, how about you? What were your motivations, or what are your motivations?
I think for me, the first one is much more personal. So as I shared earlier, I grew up in a rural community. My community had electricity in 2005. So, basically as a child, until I left for high school, pretty much I grew up without running water and electricity. I used to walk 2 hours to school. I always tell people I'm the kind of kid that if Save the Children and World Vision and these guys probably go to Africa. If they come at my time, you'll probably see me in one of their brochures. So it was just very personal. As I'm talking to you, my family still lives in the community. And so when I graduated from Penn with, the president engagement prize was $150K. And at the time I was, looking into going straight to medical school. It was kind of tough, to be honest, because when I came from Ghana, my dream, quite honestly, was just to be very rich. I was not really, in all sincerity, you don't come from a rural poor background, and I was seriously taking classes at Wharton and wanted to be like Donald Trump one day. But that changed when I got, the $150K. That's, the university's prize for the top graduating students. And I think that was when I had a moment of clarity, spoke to my parents, and my mom reminded me of how privileged I've been, right? I grew up in the community, went to school with others. When I used to go to school, there were people that were smarter than me. So it's not by mere intelligence, more like opportunity. So I thought, you know what? Why not go back home to do something? Plus I have 6 sisters, and my 2 older sisters, my parents saved on their education, so my brother and I can have education. So when we went to the community, did the feasibility study, and we found out that the education of young girls was actually sliding and was also a big social determinant of health in the community. The biggest reason why we found that there was a lot of hepatitis B infection in the community, we thought, why not? Why not just work with the community to jumpstart something? So that was more like it. And I keep telling people, if you're an African man, you can be born into a cave and you'll still be privileged. While I was born into poverty, I was still very much privileged. And this is a very clear example. And so I know that. The second thing was the fact that most of the classes I took at Penn in public health and medicine, again, I am more in the direction of medicine and public health. I kept wondering, there are so many global health nonprofits and a lot of work done in global health. Why are we still having issues? And I found out that it came from an experience I had as a child, seeing these nonprofits come into the community and just come and start doing, right? Thinking that because we were so poor wearing tattered clothing, we didn't know anything. And I found that ridiculous. And so I thought this was a good opportunity to show the world that, look, we could actually finance most of the services ourselves. When it comes to running nonprofits, it doesn't have to mean all the funding coming from the West. It could be a shared situation. And we showed that by letting people know that the people living in the community, they are not dead, they are living. And something has to be keeping them going, something monetary. And we've shown that with the farm revenues. So that idea of making that happen was what drove me, because I've always believed that whenever someone has to depend on another person, then that person that they depend on or that thing they depend on takes their power. And that's what we've seen in global development, international development for a very long time. What we think we're doing and we think is development is really not development if the solution is not being financed, co-financed by the community or being co-developed by the community. What you're doing is positive oppression and not development. And so I wanted to change that, having lived as a beneficiary and now having the opportunity to go back to work with them. Yeah.
Very good. Very interesting insight there about involving the community and tapping into their expertise, their skills, and involving them in solving their problems. So thank you, each of you, for that. I'm now going to go to the audience questions because we're getting a lot of them. And the audience, please continue to send in your questions. The first three questions are linked. So I'm going to actually just ask that question as those three questions as one question. And this is about challenges. In fact, this was a question I was going to ask you too. So to each of you, I'm going to ask each of you in turn, what was a big challenge or the big challenge you faced or are facing currently in achieving what you want to do? And I'll start with Carol. So Carol, why don't you tell us, the big challenge for you?
Sure, the challenge is always funding, lack of funding and trusted partners to work with, wherever you are, both sides. But I think funding is a major problem and bottleneck that, would not allow you to launch as many programs as you would and also to make a difference. And I say this because we have been very successful. While I was at Cambridge, all the funding that I raised with the help of some researchers, over almost £200,000 during the first 3 years of my PhD, actually, the whole time, was from the university. So it was internal funding, funded by different initiatives within the university, which was great. So we never had the need to go out. However, I did approach the Gates Foundation a few times, having gone to a few invited events, and they always saw our effort as individual effort, and saying that capacity building takes time. In other words, they're not really interested, which goes back down to what Shadrack was saying about, people give you funding, but then also the expectation is more than what they're giving you funding for. So you pretty much become almost enslaved to this funding, which then they would give you money, but tell you exactly what they want you to produce, which is really sad. And so we were successful in that regard because I was a student, but now outside of that, I'm not sure how, but like Shadrack is doing and what he's thinking, and having my own personal experience as a PhD student here in Cambridge and see how things can very quickly, you can get very quickly cut off in ways because you're technically no longer there. I believe in empowering the African people in the continent to find ways to contribute to raising funds or generating funds that can support the initiative. The problem we have, though, being from Nigeria, it's quite a lot. I shouldn't tell you about Nigeria, but it gets scary because then people are not really interested in development or things that could make a difference in the lives of other people. I think, like Shadrack said, a lot of people just want to make money and kind of eat off of the poor, which is really, and the poor themselves, sometimes if you help, they still are looking for things to get. But if our governments would come at least meet halfway with the international donors and funders to support the sort of training we do is not really for, like a book and a pen, is that we need high, core equipment, high level tech equipment that researchers need to be able to advance research and innovation the way that Africa so desperately needs. However, it's not something that just individuals can fund. It's something that we need our governments to come together to support. So that is a major challenge. And also partnership on ground can be a challenge. Who are you partnering with? Are you partnering with people who are really genuinely interested in your vision or people who are just seeking after them? Themselves. So, those are the major challenges. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So funding and where it's coming from and what they expect from you and partners on the ground. Riaz, how about you?
It's always about money, isn't it? Yeah, it was really hard to get funding. I think you got to get lucky. We got $150,000 from Facebook, primarily because I think I used to work with one of the people at Google who then joined Facebook to run that competition. But maybe also just right place, right time. And then, raising further funding. So we're not a nonprofit, we're a for-profit. And raising equity funding from venture capital funds around the world. People are very dismissive of Africa. I've had, and education technology. I've had people literally write emails back, we hate edtech and there's no further funding for Africa. And some of the largest African tech startups are essentially American companies, with headquarters in New York, raising funds from primarily American investors. So, when people don't see African markets as large enough from a commercial perspective, it can be an opportunity for local players. But if you can find a local talent base that access international markets, you interest international investors. And if you can create value on both sides, you can get something really smart going. So I think, as African entrepreneurs, you have to innovate in your business model and think about that if you really want to be able to scale, or if you need a lot of capital to scale, you have to be extra 200% innovative on how you access financing and how much time you spend doing that and how you do it. Which is unfortunate, but a reality.
So in your case, given that it's a skill that people are picking up and they get the certification and there's a demand for them in the market, presumably you charge them a fee or a for-profit. How dependent then are you on other kinds of investment? Can't you generate the money you need from your revenues?
Yeah, so we have grown revenue a lot year on year, and that's primarily being the engine to fuel the business. But if you want to do fancy things, if you want to do really special things and build a lot of deep technology and really go out and build a talent base or really do things quickly, you do need to raise capital.
Okay, interesting. Thanks, Riaz. Shadrach, how about you? What is the big challenge for you?
Yeah, I think for us, probably the challenge, thankfully, in all sincerity, funding is looking pretty okay. Yeah, we've been very fortunate to, because our innovation is sort of fit for the times and all of that. Thankfully, we are getting a lot of, foundations and donors listen to us. Challenge is actually, I think, well, probably a positive problem. Is still a problem. We're having to think to scale. And one of the things that, for me, drove me from the very beginning is to make sure we're as Afrocentric as we can be. By that, making sure we, as much as possible, many of, if not all our staff members are Ghanaian or Africans working within Ghana. What I saw in the US was a lot of, global health nonprofits will be operating in Africa, and then their development engine or, the other side will be in the West. And so we thought to change that. But then the narrative and the difficulty with that is getting certain people and certain hires with a specific skill set. For instance, the skill set of donor engagement, fundraising, and writing grants, and those are things that it seems that the West has mastered for a very long time. Because I mean, I think they started probably the industry, if you would say. So that's a current challenge we're having, getting that kind of skill set there. But we're hoping that with the pandemic and everything, we should be able to move to the other side of getting people to work remotely. The other challenge that we're probably facing is sometimes we just started expanding out, and I think Carol mentioned it earlier. For us, it's not so much funding, but specifically getting government partnerships. I believe that innovation ripples faster when we can partner with the government entities. PPPs are very much powerful. We've seen it in certain sections of operations. But then sometimes I go up to people and they're like, well, how old are you? You're still young. Are you sure you can do this? They don't even care about my degree, so or my background, and that can be a challenge. So maybe I probably need to grow more beard to look older so they'll listen to me. But yeah, those are the challenges we're facing. Yeah.
Thank you. That's really interesting. I'm interested. This is the next question, and actually it applies to a certain extent, at least two of you. Carol, you'd mentioned this very interesting digital platform that you have started to network researchers in Africa and in South Asia, where you're delivering courses. How much of a problem is internet connectivity? I'll ask you, Carol, first, and then Riaz and Shadrach, if you want, you can jump in as well.
Yeah, I think internet connectivity can be a challenge. However, I think it's improved significantly within the last few years. A lot of people have mobile phones. Even grandmas in the villages have their mobile phones, so they used to text you or share fake news from Trump. Anyway, that's by the way. But yes, a lot more people have access to computers and internet. However, there are still people, quite a number of people who find it challenging. However, what we do is that when we do the lectures, it's pre-recorded. Now we put them actually on YouTube and pre-recorded lectures, and then we have a session for Q&A where they listen to the lectures and then they can come back and ask any questions that they have. And so that way they have more access to it. They can take their time when they have internet connectivity to access the lectures and the lecture material as well. It's usually sent to them. And so, yeah, it's improved. I don't think that's a major hurdle. However, I think if you go into the rural communities and even some urban areas in certain African countries, you'll find out it's still expensive for them to get data, mobile data, to have access to the internet. So those are still major barriers, but so far it's better, much better than we've seen in the last few years.
So perhaps it's also the fact that you're reaching researchers who are in universities. Riaz, how about you? I mean, does everyone you're trying to reach have easy access to good internet?
Well, part of the reason Facebook funded us was as part of their internet.org drive, which is around, free basics and giving people some type of internet access for free. I mean, internet has gotten just faster and faster, and data has gotten exponentially cheaper here over the last 5 to 10 years. It's clearly easier across the board for internet access. I know new undersea cables being built to Africa for internet, and I think that's really it. I don't think there's so much you can innovate around it. We use things like Dropbox that allow for offline syncing. You have low data modes. You can build some things on platforms like Free Basics and Zero Rated, but primarily I do believe that the majority of urban areas will be able to catch up, and for rural areas, it's just it's about mobile connectivity. How well can you get 3G or 4G to certain areas?
Great, thanks. And Shadrach, any thoughts on that? Is that an issue for you at all? Because you're just community-based, right? So you're there in person with the community. So is it an issue?
Yeah, I mean, I always tell people when I see, especially the recent spring up of agri-tech and almost at least on the continent right now. So I spent three years full time. Building everything from the ground up with the team and everything before I go back to school in 2018 to start my master's, my first master's. And I saw a huge boom of tech companies on the continent, and particularly agri-tech ones that deal with farmers. And I always found it interesting how they did it because I always tell people my dad or my mom in the village as a farmer holding a phone and you tell them, you send them a text, and then they will check their corporate, they won't do it. So it's just a reality. So I'm always curious when I see agri-tech numbers, and I'm like, oh, really, that's nice. How did you do it? But the reality is that in rural areas, in fact, they actually detest it, at least my community and the communities we work in, because people feel very strongly that tech is destroying the social fabric. And so, I mean, when my dad came to the US, you'll find me be on my phone a lot, like, get it back into your pocket. So in the rural communities we are in, people like more in-person interactions. And I'll tell you what, that's actually a problem they're having with COVID-19, because it's totally obstructed the way that they're used to living. And so it's internet connectivity on our campuses, you know, our school and our health facilities. We do have internet because we partner with Vodacom. Again, you know, partnerships. But within the community, there is no cell tower. So sometimes if you want to make a call, you have to go get on the mountain or something. It can be a challenge, but I love it because when I'm home, my mind is peaceful. So yeah, that's
interesting
about it. Yeah.
Very interesting insights there. Great, thank you. So let's move on. We have more questions. Here's a question for each of you, and maybe you'll have an interesting response to this. If you were to launch a startup in Africa today, what sector would you target? Carol, you want to take that?
Well, I'm still in the education, agriculture sector. So finding ways to bridge the gap between what happens in the lab and what happens in the farm and vice versa is really important. Like Shadrack said, you know, agri-tech, and there's a lot of apps, so many apps. I mean, I went to Benin Republic and I saw, I think it's a World Bank funding a lot of people from France and America, and they're all over the farms, sort of almost harassing the farmers who don't even speak French. They speak like local languages, asking them, collecting data, talking about stuff. And the unfortunate thing is the brainwashing that has gone on into Africans seeing themselves less than we really are than other people. And so the local farmers will not even talk to their own people who are agricultural researchers in the country. However, they will talk to someone from France who's collecting data to publish some cool paper somewhere, which really, really made me sad. I was so upset. And I did speak to the researchers there and I said, how are you guys helping your community and your people to prevent the sort of predatory kind of research that is going on, trying to collect all kinds of information that we in Africa don't even have access to. However, you will see it in Cambridge and you will see it in Harvard and everywhere else, but we don't even have access to know the type of crops that we have on the continent. Most of them have disappeared, but they are stored in germplasm somewhere in the UK, which is really sad. And so I would love to, if I had to, I would really work on in the area of policy, agriculture and education, finding a way to tie all three around. But we need to get our governments to listen. They're not listening. And that is a major challenge.
Okay, very interesting. Riaz?
Fintech is good. Can't go wrong with
fintech.
I really like fintech, right? So do something like start a digital bank, start a, you know, some kind of investments, make it easier for people to invest in international stocks, foreign exchange, remittances. There's so many things. There's so many, you know, there's so much money you pay here to bank and to be involved. And, you know, things like M-Pesa are quite amazing, but, you know, there's low hanging fruit, simpler things. I think there's still a lot of opportunities there. And you can attract a lot of international investment and interest, which you can't do with education, and that's the truth. And you can't do as easily with health even. So you know, if you want to go that high growth equity route, start the next Revolut from Monzo in Africa.
Interesting. Shadrach, you?
I don't know. I think for me, and this is something we're seeing a lot, it's probably what I think needs to be done. If I were to start a startup, or if I had money to give to somebody to start a startup, or probably, you know, be looking to setting up maybe a research institute that draws the interface between academic partners, community-based organizations, and the communities themselves. There's such a disconnect. One of the things we found is that, you know, people go into development, right? And they say they're going to do good, but we all know. I mean, I always say whatever any human being does, there's a taint of selfishness behind it. So grappling with that if we're going to keep doing development, we're going to keep making startup without profit or for profit, then the people we serve, especially in the nonprofit sector, deserve evidence and deserve that their impact are driven by evidence that go beyond sub stories. I can't tell you, maybe because probably, I keep saying it. I wouldn't be surprised if I walk into some nonprofits someday, like World Vision, and I find a picture of my childhood picture with my big belly and my naked self standing in front of our family hut in the forest, on the cocoa farm, on there. But for a long time, development has been driven by, soft stories. It is time we move beyond that to start actually saying, look, the communities we work with deserve empirical data. And then we use that data to keep moving forward. But then when we do that research, like Carol shared, it's imperative that we engage the communities as well. Let them know why the evidence we're collecting matters, what became of it. And that's why a hub, an academic hub that, interfaces all those three components will be very crucial going forward. And of course, if it is to be done, it will have to be built back home, not in the West. There are far too many academic hubs overseas, and I think we need to get more home. Yeah.
Interesting. Oh, thank you again, all of you, for those very interesting responses. The next question, and I think we probably have time for a couple of questions at least. Here's a question about mentors and how important is finding a mentor when it comes to growing your startup. I know that here in Cambridge, in our accelerator in the business school, we focus a lot on that element. So I just want to ask each of you, maybe Shadrach, we can start with you, we'll go backwards this time. What about you, Shadrach? Did you have a mentor? Do you think it's important? How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, as an undergrad, I studied biology. So, I did all the pipetting and I still love it. You can see the hood behind me. So, going from that to a world where I had to be wearing suits and ties and stand in front of people, it was a total shift. I had to push out of my sciencey introverted self to learn the skills of communication. It was quite a steep learning curve for me. And so mentors played a really crucial role. And particularly the first set of mentors I had were obviously, at Penn, professors that I took class with, that I connected with. And then when I went home, interestingly, my biggest mentors became my parents. They lived in the community, they guided, and then also the village chief. Right now, the mentors that really drive the work that we do, and me personally, and the work that we do in the communities are what the people that we call the village committee. And these are people that we selected from the communities. The community members work with us to bring them together. They advise us on what to do and basically tell us what to do and what not to do, so not to step on any traditional taboos or whatever. But yeah, mentors are very, very, very important. Yeah.
Great.
They minimize your yeah.
And you find them in your community. So that's wonderful. Riaz, how about you? Have you had a mentor or do you have several? Have you been through accelerators, done all that stuff?
Yeah, we've been through a lot of accelerators, but recently we built an advisory board of 3 very experienced ex-entrepreneurs in the space, and that's been incredibly useful. Running it like a board of directors, taking on quite a structured approach and getting that critical feedback, getting pushed, by people with more experience and knowledge is really important. And yeah, it's important to find mentors who are quite serious about it, will participate, can give a commitment. It's easy to dish out kind of informal advice, but you do want people who can dive into the specifics of the business and specific problems and share, their own experiences. Also been a part of some great entrepreneur communities like ICE in the UK, which is a conclave of entrepreneurs and, groups of entrepreneurs at later stage mentoring one another, like peer-based mentoring, which has been super helpful.
Great, thanks. Having an advisory board, very important in finding the right people. Carol?
Well, I haven't had a personal mentor, but I have learned a lot from different people, and I've had a lot of supporters, a lot of well-wishers, and particularly in Cambridge. When I was in the US before I came here, because that's where I live, I had the opportunity to sort of gain business skills, because I was a scientist, never knew I could do anything like I'm doing now in addition to science. So it was really scary. I was like, I can't do that. But I had to go to the Maryland women's business something. Anyway, they run courses for women entrepreneurs, which was really helpful. And so there I learned how to write a business plan and really learn, I'm liking the words now. Yeah, how to sort of, start a business or start, and be entrepreneur, really. And that really helped me a lot. It was very challenging. It was very different, but it did help me a lot to jumpstart and get the foundation started. And then in Cambridge, it was more academic, right? But also I had some PIs and senior members who really still support the foundation. So they would help with fundraising. However, I do believe that having an advisory board that is not just sitting there, people who are really able to contribute by really taking the work seriously and going out to really get stuff to help will be great. And then also, because I haven't had this mentorship, I then set up this mentoring scheme that we have now set up with for African bioscience students to mentor people. So I do believe in the power of mentoring. I haven't been that fortunate to have one, but it would be great if I would find someone who can mentor me personally.
Okay, well, we're coming up to the end of this session. We have quite a few more questions, but frankly, I don't think we're going to be able to get to them to do them justice. But I'll just very quickly read them out, and perhaps, if there's some way we can feedback your answers at some point, we'll do that. So, just very quickly, some of the other questions are, what's your message to aspiring entrepreneurs? I'm sure you have many messages. You've already communicated a number of them, I would say. I took away many things, particularly, look at the opportunities in Africa. What are the gaps? Where can you do things in Africa that you couldn't do anywhere else in the world? How do you leverage your skills and learning from outside, from the US, from the UK and your networks here, but work with people there on the ground, building skills, building the next generation of researchers, the next generation of coders, the next generation of tech farmers. So I took a lot of inspiration from and a lot of lessons there. Another question was someone saying, very inspiring, I absolutely agree. And they're asking about trade-offs between thinking big and scaling, having a big impact, but also not being exaggerated. I think we have that a lot in entrepreneurship, people exaggerating what they can do and so on, and that backfires. That was a great question. There was a question for Riaz. What do you find most rewarding in your work? How many startups do you think you've helped so far? Great question. For Carol, how successful have your projects been, or your project been in attracting attention from major funders? I think we answered that one. A question to all speakers, what do you think has been the most pivotal factor for success? Riaz, you mentioned pros and cons of being in the UK. What were some of the cons? And Carol, as a woman challenging the status quo, have you found greater barriers than male counterparts? We could probably spend another hour discussing those. Unfortunately, we're out of time. I really want to take this opportunity to thank our wonderful speakers. It's so great to have you on this session, to see what you're doing, to be so inspired. And thank you for sharing your stories with our audience, with people in this festival, being part of this wonderful festival. So once again, thank you everyone, our speakers and the audience for joining. And we look forward to seeing you in one of the other of the many sessions that we are hosting as part of this Alumni Festival. Thank you.